Welcome to the newest episode of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. In today's episode, we're going to talk about this week's big news with the release of the 2025 schedule, and specifically the Cup Series going to Mexico, and what NASCAR had to say about Kyle Busch returning to the country where he was arrested in 2023, and my overall thoughts on the race in Mexico and NASCAR's recent expansion into other areas. We'll also discuss what Denny Hamlin had to say on his Actions Detrimental podcast this week when talking about the addition of Lee Diffie to the NBC broadcast booth. The Joe Gibbs Racing driver didn't sugarcoat what he hopes for the announcer's future, which would directly affect Mike Joy. And he also shared his overall feelings on Fox's coverage. Speaking of Fox, analyst Kevin Harvick had a few interesting things to say himself this week on his Happy Hour podcast, including openly questioning NASCAR's playoff format as well as what happened during the Daytona race with Daniel Suarez's car unexpectedly catching on fire. Harvick then made some interesting comments about his crappy-ass parts remark from a couple of years ago at Darlington. And we'll also have an extended By the Numbers segment, where we're going to take a deep dive examining the playoff drivers, including those already locked in and the 4 who are battling for those final spots this weekend at Darlington. However, before we do that, I want to thank today's sponsor, carcovers.com. You may remember I first introduced them as part of our Father's Day gift guide back in June. As the name indicates, these guys are your one-stop shop when it comes to top-of-the-line car covers. They have a huge selection to choose from with a wide range of car cover materials and sizes, which means that you are bound to find something perfect for your vehicle, no matter the make or model. What I really love about carcovers.com is the quality of materials is second to none because they use only the highest quality fabrics that have been tested and proven to hold up over long periods of time. When it comes to the best of the best, I'd highly recommend their top-of-the-line Platinum Shield cover, which comes with a limited lifetime warranty. What's also really great about carcovers.com is they stand behind their products with a variety of warranties and a cover fit guarantee. If they make a mistake, you can speak with a friendly member of their US-based customer service team and arrange to send back the cover, and they'll gladly pay return shipping cost. Speaking of shipping cost, it's absolutely free in the US and Canada. But don't take my word for it. Go check out their more than 500,000 verified reviews, and you can see how carcovers.com is the only place to go when you want to get a cover for your vehicle, both indoor or outdoor. And for beating and banging fans, they have a special offer just for you, where you can receive $15 off of your purchase. There's a link in the description. And now, let's get to our first story of the day, and that's NASCAR's big announcement of the 2025 schedule. And the biggest part of that is that the Cup Series will be racing internationally for the first time in more than 65 years next year, heading south of the border to Mexico City. Daniel Suarez and NASCAR Executive Vice President and Chief Venue and Racing Innovation Officer Ben Kennedy were in Mexico City on Tuesday, announcing the news, including a video conference with reporters. Fox's Bob Pockrass started it off with the first question, and it was the question I was going to ask. Will Kyle Busch be able to race in the event after what happened last year? In case you don't remember, Busch was arrested and detained in January 2023 when trying to leave the country because airport security discovered a handgun in his luggage, which he said he forgot was in there. He has a permit to carry in the U.S. He agreed to plead guilty and was adjudicated under a section of Mexican law that allows any prison sentence under 4 years to be commuted, allowing him to leave the country by paying a $1,000 fine and an undisclosed bond. Busch stated back then that the issue was closed. Here's what NASCAR's Kennedy had to say about the Busch situation.
Yeah, we've had a couple of communications, certainly with the team, and the issues have been resolved, so we don't foresee any challenges there. And I'm sure Kyle is excited to be down here in Mexico City next year.
A short time after the announcement, Busch confirmed Kennedy's remarks on X. Excited to race for another win in Mexico in 2025, he posted, including photos from his Xfinity Series win the last time NASCAR raced there in 2008. Chase Elliott told reporters earlier in the day that he liked the thought of NASCAR racing outside of the country and gave the sanctioning body credit for trying to do different things. And I have to completely agree. In the last 4 years, NASCAR has taken some really big swings and done so in an effort to appeal to a variety of audiences, both old and new fans. We'll start with COTA in 2021, which I'm obviously a big fan of being from Austin. And then we have had the Clash inside the LA Coliseum. We've raced through the streets of Chicago, all huge steps outside of the box. Oh, yeah, we've also returned to our roots at North Wilkesboro, and we're going to Bowman Gray next year. And now we're going international. I know that I can be critical of NASCAR, and they definitely have earned it on more than a few occasions. But I have to say, Kennedy and the front office deserve kudos for stepping out of their comfort zone and trying new things over the last few years. And based on what he said to the media, they aren't stopping there. I would guess Canada and specifically Montreal gets a date in 2026, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens. Moving on to our next story, and it's regarding the popularity of the sport. If there's any doubt about how fans currently view the sport, take a look at the television ratings from Saturday night's race at Daytona. According to NBC, it was the most watched Daytona race since 2021 with 3.6 million viewers, which was a 6% increase over last year and the 3.38 million who tuned in. But that's just one race. Take a look at what's happened in the last couple of months. At the Brickyard, which returned to the Oval this year, it produced the second 4-year high on viewership with 3.63 million viewers watching, up from last year's 2.83 million. Oh yeah, and the Chicago Street Race, it was the second most watched NASCAR race on NBC since 2021 with 3.87 million tuning in. Translation, more fans are tuning in to watch, and you can't help but think that some of that is a result of new fans who have likely attended their first races at these newer venues. Of course, these numbers are during NBC's coverage this year, which brings us to the next story, and it's what Denny Hamlin had to say on his Actions Detrimental podcast this week when discussing those final moments of the Daytona race. The JGR driver was asked what he thought about NBC's latest edition, play-by-play man Lee Diffie, and his call.
Fantastic. Oh my gosh. Can we sign him up for 36 of 36 races?
Maybe.
Can we just make that executive decision at NBC or NASCAR? Just say, hey, non-exclusive. Let him do all the races. He is just fantastic. He knows how to match the moment. I don't know what it is. It's just the great ones know how to match the moment with their voice. They change their tone. They change the speed in which they're calling a race, right? That's why he was tabbed to do the 100 meters in the Olympics, right? Like, because that's what he does and what he's really, really good at. So he's just a fantastic addition. I thought, generally speaking, NBC's production, like the 3D car that they're doing, they're showing, all these, when something goes wrong, they've got the CAD that shows all the stuff. That NBC is just knocking it out of the park right now. And know what was great about it too? They let him have it. They let him have the moment. Steve and Jeff, they didn't get in it. They knew that this guy's the play-by-play. Let him call it, right? And then we will react to what we just saw after the checker flag. That's a little bit of the chaos that you have, I feel like, at Fox, is like everyone's trying to call the last lap, and it's a little messy sometimes. But man, they nailed it. They nailed the finish. It had me standing up in my chair the last lap, and I didn't have a dog in the Harrison Burton-Kyle Busch fight.
Speaking of Fox and being messy, I want to talk about Kevin Harvick and what he had to say this week on his Happy Hour podcast about a couple of subjects. First, he weighed in with his opinion on the playoffs and specifically the win and you're in situation after what happened this past weekend at Daytona with Harrison Burton clinching a berth in the playoffs. Take a listen.
I just wonder what the balance is between do we want our best 16 cars or do we want it to be exciting? This is exciting. And I agree with everything that's going on. And this is not anything against Harrison Burton. It's not anything against Daniel Suarez. But are those our best 16 cars that we're going to have racing for the championship? Or does it matter? If you have 5 or 6 guys that are in there that we're going to be, 30 something in the points or 20 something in the points, is the integrity of the playoffs? Is it putting our best foot forward as far as representing our best 16 cars as we go into playoffs? I think he scored almost 300 points less than Kyle Larson. And I know that's the way that the system is set up. Win and you're in. But is that all that there is? For me, I have a hard time with the win and you're in strategy, because we have such a long season with everything that we do that goes with cup racing. So I can see it both ways. There's an entertainment side, but I'm a traditional racer that wants the best 16 guys to race for that championship.
Now, I know a lot of you aren't going to like what I have to say, but I have to disagree with Harvick on this one. Here's why. I look at NASCAR season as similar to college basketball in its March Madness. For starters, there's an end-of-the-year tournament that everyone is trying to make. And when you think about what happens in college basketball, at the end of the year, the top teams receive invitations by the selection committee. But then there are some teams that make the tournament who might even have a losing record, but they get in because they got hot at the right time and won their conference tournament and received that automatic berth. Harrison Burton was one of those teams with a losing record, got hot at Daytona, and now he's rewarded with a chance to race for the championship in the playoffs. Like those underdog teams in March Madness, the odds are heavily stacked against him, but there's just that small glimmer of hope, and I really, really like that. Moving on to something else Harvick had to say, and it was regarding Daniel Suarez's car catching on fire. If you'll recall, it was a couple of years ago that the Stewart-Haas Racing number 4 car caught on fire and Happy was not happy about it, and that's when he made his crappy-ass parts remark. Take a listen to what he had to say about Suarez's car and his own issues at Darlington a couple of years ago.
We've seen a lot of these cars catch on fire, and I think that some of the fire retardant of the body panels and a lot of the panels inside the car probably should be looked at.
Yeah.
With everything that happened in this particular situation, I don't know that should end a car's race. It's a very unique situation, which is how we get to a lot of these scenarios of learning.
Yep.
And I think that this is definitely something that we need to learn from. We didn't learn from the foam in the doors and the heat shields and there was no fire retardant on the foam that was in the doors, and we just let 5 or 6 cars burn up, and finally I'd had enough, and we had the crappy ass parts comment at Darlington when it ended my race, and they had worked on it a little bit, but from that point forward they worked on it a lot more and have solved those issues since. So I would just question how long some of that stuff will actually burn, and what the fire retardant of the body panels and things are, and what that is.
A couple of things here. Harvick is clearly suggesting NASCAR needs to further investigate the fire with the number 99 to prevent this from happening again. But then I thought it was really interesting hearing him talk about a couple of years ago and how NASCAR was working on fixing the problem with cars catching on fire, but they only ramped up their efforts to address the problem after his crappy-ass parts remark. If that's true, which I have no reason to believe it's not, it makes you wonder why a driver's comments serve as more motivation to fix the problem and not the fires themselves. You'd think addressing something that can kill your competitors would be a top priority. Things that make you go, All right, now it's time for this week's extended By the Numbers segment. And let's start with our regular feature each week, and that's the last 5 races analysis. This week, even with Tyler Reddick having a bad day with the 28th place at Daytona, the 2311 racing driver still holds down the top spot with an 8 even average finishing position. And look who's in number 2, Reddick's teammate Bubba Wallace at 10.2. Wallace has been on a solid run lately, the exception that 26th at Michigan, where he appeared to have a race-winning car but fell victim to a crash. Wallace is followed by Brad Keselowski, and how about that for number 4 with rookie Carson Hocevar, whose last 5 includes 4 finishes inside the top 12. Impressive stuff for the 21-year-old driver. Following Hocevar are Christopher Bell, Ryan Blaney, Chris Buescher, and 2 drivers who have not been in our top 10 all season, RCR running mates Kyle Busch and Austin Dillon. Remember, it was just before the Olympic break, and we were talking about Rowdy being near the bottom of this entire list, as evident by his finishes at Pocono and Indianapolis. Dillon's struggles this season have been well documented, but it's been much better in the last 5 races. Buoyed by that win with an asterisk at Richmond, he is tied with Kyle Larson to round out the top 10. I want to also point out 2 drivers further down the list, and they are Joey Logano and Martin Truex Jr. First, the 2-time champ Logano has been on the struggle bus in the last 5. Yes, of course I remember what happened on that last lap at Richmond, but these are the numbers we're working with. Regardless, I wanted to show his numbers and then take a look at Martin Truex Jr.'s. Besides that 8th at Pocono, the 2017 champ has had his issues as well. Look at those numbers. Now, the reason I bring up these two specifically is because one of them, Logano, is locked into the playoffs with his Nashville win, while Truex is all but assured a spot in the postseason based on his points total, sitting 58 points above the cut line. Now, I want to take a look at this great visual that my buddy Joel Steuben created, and it includes all the drivers locked into the playoffs like Logano, as well as all of those who are vying for those final spots. And that's Truex, Chris Buescher, Ross Chastain, and Bubba Wallace. Quite honestly, the idea for this graphic was all inspired by Wallace's quote after Daytona on Saturday night, when he said this:
"You got one car fighting for a regular season championship and another car right around a bubble. It's unacceptable. So I'll take all that weight on my shoulders. Should have won multiple times this year and I haven't. So we don't deserve to be here, and we are. So I got to go win next week. That's it."
When Wallace said that, all I could think was, does he deserve to be here? Is he worthy of being in playoff contention? And the only way to objectively determine if this is true or not is by breaking down the numbers. When you look at all of these numbers, we all know the most important category is wins. Just ask Harrison Burton. That gets you an automatic berth in the playoffs. However, I think when we start looking at the other stats, that's when we get a more complete picture of what has happened through the first 25 races in 2024 and who stacks up where. So let's start with those top 5s. When looking at the drivers in playoff contention, as you can see, Wallace is tied with Buescher with 5, followed by Truex and Logano at 4, Chastain at 3, and you see the one-time winners rounding out the list, which you'll notice is a familiar theme. Now, let's go to top 10s, and Buescher has 11, one more than Wallace, who is followed by Truex, Chastain, Logano, and the one-timers. Continuing on to our top 20 category, and you notice a trend developing. Buescher is up near the top for all the drivers with 20, only trailing Chase Elliott's series-leading 23. Of our playoff contenders, Chastain slots in next at 19, followed by Wallace at 18, Truex at 16, and Logano and Suarez are tied at 13. Moving on to another interesting category, and that's DNFs. But before we discuss the playoff contenders, I want you to take a look at who's at the top. Seabell has had a crazy up-and-down season with those 6 DNFs and 3 wins. Coming in second is Logano at 5. Wallace and Chastain both have 3, while Truex and Buescher are the best at 1 each. Wrapping up our analysis, I think this last category of average finishing position provides the most clarity for me of who is worthy of a potential playoff spot, because it shows the consistency of the drivers throughout the entirety of the season. When you think about it, any driver who has earned their right to be in the playoffs based solely on points would be inside the top 16. Now, let's take a look at our list, and the numbers clearly show who that is. Bubba Wallace is just inside of it at 15.8, while Martin Truex Jr. is just outside of it at 16.2. But then you have all the single race winners rounding out the bottom. I think these numbers clearly show that Wallace is definitely worthy of being here, at least as far as being in playoff contention is concerned. But making the playoffs is a whole other story. He's not in yet, and that's what makes this system so great. It rewards consistency, but also allows those wild card winners to get in. As I mentioned earlier, it's like March Madness. In other words, every driver has hope that they can make it into the postseason up until that final regular season race, which is this Sunday at Darlington. Who will make it in? Will it be another surprise winner? That's why we'll all be tuning in. All right, guys, that's a wrap on this episode. We talked about multiple topics, and I want to get your thoughts. What do you think about NASCAR going to Mexico in 2025? Do you like the moves NASCAR has made in recent years to try and do different things? Also, what did you think about Denny Hamlin's comments on Lee Diffie taking over for all the broadcast and replacing Mike Joy? And what did you think about Harvick's playoff comments? Do you like the win and you're in scenario that is similar to the NCAA tournament? Or do you want only the 16 best drivers racing for a championship? And finally, what did you think of this week's By the Numbers segment? Any numbers in there that surprised you? And again, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, carcovers.com. If you're in the market for a car cover, definitely go check out their awesome selection of car covers, both indoor and outdoor. And Beating and Banging fans receive a great discount of $15 off your purchase. There's a link in the description. Thanks as always for supporting the channel. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.